This panel is called How Do We Grow? And it's focused on the high-tech sector in Montana. And I just want to recognize the panelists who all drove today. Zeb from Bozeman, Michael and Eric Karpula from Missoula, but not a great day to be on the road, so I really appreciate them taking the time to be here. By way of introduction, my name is Will Price. I'm a partner at a firm called Next Frontier Capital, which is a venture firm based in Bozeman. And today and last night were my first chamber meetings. I'm a newly elected director to the chamber, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you. But before I go to the panel, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of technology and what I'd call advanced industries as it relates to economic growth. There's a study by the Brookings Institute that's looked back till 1975 and try to help understand what's one of the real mysteries of the American economy, which is the stagnation of wages. Well, it turns out that in the high-tech sector, the advanced industry sector, wages have grown by a factor of 5 over non-advanced industry jobs since 1975. So the fact that wages are flat on average is a function of, that average is misleading because technology jobs and knowledge economy jobs are really booming. It's the rest of the economy that's struggling. And do you think about the future of Montana, the Envision 2026 program, having more high-paid technology jobs in the state will help our economy grow significantly. One of the factors of growing technology companies is capital. If you think about drug development where there's no revenue for 10 years, or the photonics industry where it takes 2 or 3 years to develop a product or software even, equity capital is a huge part of funding businesses ahead of sales from customers. And Montana historically has been at the very bottom of equity capital in terms of availability to entrepreneurs. If you think about our peers, Utah and Colorado, they get about $200 per capita in venture dollars. Montana, as a few years ago, was getting something like $2 to $3 per capita, so a factor of 100 times less capital. There's a interesting economic theory that begs that question, which is that capital in theory flows to return. So if capital's not flowing into Montana, it must mean that in aggregate, the financial markets don't view Montana entrepreneurs as backable. They're not going to generate returns. I think all of us feel, and we know entrepreneurs in the state, that that's not a fair characterization of their efforts. So there must be something else going on systemically that's preventing capital from flowing to Montana. And I think if one of the things to think about it is risk capital needs to be rewarded. And if there's not sufficient inducement from the returns that are possible in their own right, what can policyholders do to attract further capital? And I just want to recognize Jim Hamilton in the last session, who sponsored a bill called HB 187, which the Chamber was supportive, the Montana Bankers Association was supportive, which is designed to provide a credit to investors that put their capital at risk to support Montana companies. And it was a bill that got through the House and unfortunately died in the Senate, but it will come back in the next session. And I'd like to encourage people to think about the needs for providing incremental, if you want to use the word subsidized return, through tax credits to encourage people in Montana to support our local entrepreneurs, because it's clear that in the absence of something like that, angel investing in particular has been challenged significantly. Our firm is a little bit later stage than Angel. We manage 2 venture funds. One is $21.1 million. We raised that in 2015, and we're just closing a $35 million fund. We've made 11 investments, 10 of which have employees in Montana. And I'm very proud to say we've really shifted the landscape for equity capital here in the state by a factor of 5 since we started investing. Our companies, since we started, have raised $72 million in aggregate over the last 2.5 years. 12 of that comes from our firm, and 60 million of it comes from out-of-state investors who are first-time Montana investors. So I think I think it's fair to say that a classic constraint of equity capital not being available, which we all have heard, I think significantly, is increasingly less the case. And not only is it less the case here, if you want to think about it domestically in Montana, but that New York, California, Colorado, Utah investors are viewing Montana increasingly as a credible place to put their money. Michaels can talk about some of the money he's raised this year and the investment process in that regard. So what we're going to talk about today is the experience of each of the panelists as it respects to forming new companies and the growth they've experienced, what lessons we can draw from their growth, what barriers they may have faced in that journey, and how others can learn from that, whether it's entrepreneurs that are following behind them and who can take lessons from their journey, or policy legislators who can think about correcting any policy issues that may have hindered, frustrated that growth. So what I'm going to do is start off with ask each of the panelists, maybe starting with Eric, to introduce themselves, their company, and then we'll go into just a Q&A process up here. So Eric, if I can start with you, and we'll go down the list.
Thanks, Will. My name's Eric Siegfried. I'm the CEO of OnX. We started in 2009, based out of Missoula, Montana. Actually started out of my house, and now we're at 70 employees. We actually have 2 offices, one in Missoula, and we also have an office in Bozeman. Bozeman, we have 15 people. Missoula, we have about 55 people. Some of you might be familiar with our hunting product. Back in 2009, I started by creating a map for a Garmin GPS unit that showed land ownership and hunting specific boundaries, so people could see public and private property boundaries while they're in the field, as well as other hunting specific and access related information. Since then, we've expanded to basically turning your smartphone into a GPS, where we have a lot of the similar data. Most people know us for our land ownership data and the fact that you can figure out who owns what pieces of property while you're in the field, and see exactly where your position is relative to those property boundaries while in the field. So, we're expanding into other markets. We're all about access-related information, public lands, all the fishing access sites, everything related to access. We're going to try to basically answer the question for a lot of outdoor recreationists of where can I go? And that's really what inspired me to start this company. Is I landed in Bozeman, I landed in Missoula throughout my life, and I looked at the mountains and didn't know where to go. So that's really what inspired me to start this company, and that's what I want to keep doing.
Thanks, Eric. I will say that the next company, Next Frontier, is a very proud investor of Submittable. And OnX, I hope one day Eric will let me be investor of. I have to prove my value to him. Okay, Michael.
Thanks, Will. So my name is Michael Fitzgerald. I am the CEO and one of the founders of Submittable. We started in 2010. We have 56 employees now. We have raised some venture capital from Will, and Will invested a significant amount of money in us, but also one of the great things that he did was sort of crack open. In May, we did a Series A for $5.5 million, and the lead investor was from Silicon Valley, which I don't think would have happened if Will hadn't sort of planted the seed and already had experience with us. Like, they want to see that there's people on the ground here, and that was incredibly valuable. So we started in 2010. My background is I have a master's degree in English, and I was a published novelist. Published novelists don't get paid very well, so I'd always written software to sort of pay the bills. And in 2008, we sort of I ran into the recession, and with 2 friends, we said we should start a company. And so we just started writing code. We didn't really know what we wanted to do, but by 2010, our wives, or my wife at least, said you have to make some money. So we went out and found some customers, and the first use case was, because of my publishing background, I knew that publishers had this process where they accepted manuscripts or they accepted queries and then reviewed them. And the very first product was just that. It was the ability for an organization to accept a file and then within the organization have it seen by multiple people. For the first 2 years, it was primarily publishers that were our customers. But we've since moved into video, resumes, RFPs. Nike uses, like, our customers now are Nike, National Geographic, AT&T, GitHub, and they use this for multiple different use cases. Anything that's coming into your organization that needs to be seen and taken action on by more than one person is a use case. Media-intensive applications, both MSU and UM use it for certain application processes. We have over 10,000 clients, and the exciting thing, we've grown a little over 100% in the last 2 years. So we went from 20. Was your investment 2 years ago?
It was 2015.
So 2015, we went from 17 employees, and we're now at 55, and that's partially been facilitated by capital. And the next big thing for us is every organization that uses Submittable, it's a centralized authentication. So everybody who creates we call an opportunity, meaning the ability, like a call for manuscripts or a call for music applications. We have indexed all that, and we've created metadata around that, and we now can broadcast that to people who create. So if I'm an author, I sign up for a Submittable account, and I get a digest every day of every potential opportunity for the kinds of things that I write. You upload your manuscript, we examine it, and using AI, we go and find a match or potential series of matches. And so we're essentially expanding into a consumer application where historically we've always been a business application. And we're super excited. It's going very well.
Zeb?
You know, I should also, Liz and Frontier Fund were really one of, I mean, Will's sort of cutting his teeth and things, but those guys were out here before, I mean.
I agree with that.
Like, you know, angel investing is one of the most punk rock things I could ever, like, it is crazy. And Liz was doing it, you know, 10 years ago, and it's just very commendable. Thanks, Liz. I know.
Zeb?
Thanks. So I'm Zeb Barber. I'm the director of the Montana State University Spectrum Lab. So I'm not a CEO of a company, but our lab is involved in the optics cluster in Bozeman, involved in taking technologies out of the university and helping to commercialize that. And we've been very successful in the past. Since it was formed in 1999, we've spun off approximately 5 companies that are now supporting over 100 people, 100 jobs in Bozeman in the optics industry. And so my task here is to represent that optics cluster and try to convey to you what we've done well, what we see going forward in the future, and what this group and the state of Montana can do to help build other types of high-tech clusters in Montana to help support the future of high-tech industry.
Thanks, Zeb. That's great. So I'll just stay with you, Zeb, just because we'll go back to reverse order this time. So the Montana Photonics Industry Association, I think it's noted there's roughly 30 companies in Bozeman, and Bozeman has become recognized globally now as a leader in the photonics space. What are some of the lessons that other industries can learn from a cluster as successful as the photonics cluster in Bozeman, and what are some of the examples of companies that have emerged from your lab, and what are some of the real-world applications they're working on? So, you know, kind of a long set of questions there, but get back to you.
Well, I'll say one of the important things, this is not self-serving, Montana State University, being a university town, is important, but it's not the driver of the industry. In actuality, the industry has kind of driven MSU to go into the optics space. So in the first optics companies that started in Bozeman, Big Sky Laser and ILX Lightwave were implants. They were not from MSU. They were people who were outside, wanting to start an optics company, wanted to live in a place with a great environment, outdoor activities, and so they located their companies in Bozeman. And that, they went along for a while, and then they started interacting with people at the university, and the university was noticing, oh, hey, there's this industry here that we can help support. And so in the early 90s, MSU started the Optical Technology Center, hired a few more faculty in the area of optics to help push along that industry. And so I would say, you know, one of the things that's, I think, been important for the Bozeman optics industry is that kind of university industry partnership, and also the university people being willing and able and desiring to help support that industry. So, you know, we've continued to hire faculty, we've added new programs, such as we have a Masters in Optics program at MSU now, and we also have a tech program at the Gallatin College for photonics technicians, and that was a direct ask by the industry. And that's going to really, already there's been 2 classes. Every single person who's in that 2-year program has already got a job in the industry, and it's really been important for for us university people to, kind of respond, and that's really helped, I think, grow the industry.
And then a couple of the companies maybe that you want to mention that have
Okay.
emerged and what they do.
Yeah, so at Spectrum Lab, we've spun off a few companies. The first one that we spun off was called S2 Corporation, was actually a joint venture with Scientific Materials Corp., who is actually now part of FLIR Corporation there in Bozeman. But that one company, even that company still exists, but that building of that one company has spun off lots of other companies, such as Bridger Photonics, which works in the coherent LiDAR and LiDAR space, that works for industrial metrology for making very high precision, short range measurements. Also doing gas sensing for measuring methane for oil and gas exploration and detecting leaks in areas in that industry. And then also spun off from that was a company that, Will, you've invested in, Blackmore Sensors and Analytics, who's looking at the 3D imaging market. In particular, autonomous vehicle is one area that they're looking into. So I would say, one of the interesting things about a cluster is that once you have basically a certain mass, particularly in a high-tech industry, you have cross-seeding between companies. They can have people move between companies, and that was actually one of the things that we knew when we really had something here, is when people not only just went from one company to another, but actually had moved to a third company in the same industry in Bozeman. So we knew it was a sustainable thing that we had.
I think this is a really interesting point. If you think about, so S2 spawned Bridger Photonics, Blackmore Sensors, and then Montana Instruments, which which is another company of significance. So you see this derivative genealogy of companies. If you look at right now, in our portfolio we have a company called Quick, which the CTO right now ran. We have another company called Iron Core Labs, which is another right now alum. But I think the Bozeman Chronicle did a study of roughly 20-odd companies that are now in Bozeman that are all can trace their lineage back to Greg and the Right Now organization. So these clusters do get kickstarted at some level of critical mass. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what the Submittable and Onyx spinoffs are in time for, in Missoula as your successes continue to grow. So Michael, one of the things that's really unique about your journey is you started in Missoula, but then you went to an accelerator on the West Coast, and then you made the decision to come back to Montana. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about, what that experience was. Where did you go? What people thought when you said you were going to leave Mountain View and go back to Missoula? And then, some of the maybe harder lessons you've learned in terms of what it took to build a company in Missoula versus just staying in the Bay Area.
Sure. So we went to something called Y Combinator, which they call themselves a seed accelerator, and they essentially take companies when they're sort of in that zygote stage and give them a little bit of capital, enough to basically put themselves out on a limb. And then hopefully either raise more money or grow the company. And some of the alumni are Dropbox, Airbnb, Instacart. I think their portfolio is worth something like $6 billion at this point. And it was founded by founders, namely Paul Graham and Jessica Simpson, or just Jessica Livingston, sorry.
And Khloe Kardashian.
It's a 3-month, they invest in your company and they take equity, but they invite you down there, and it's about 30 to 40 companies. And you essentially go through this boot camp where you're supposed to do 3 things. You're either talking to customers, building product, or exercising. And I did gain 20 pounds while I was there. So I wasn't doing number 3. But they sort of set you up for the Silicon Valley journey, which is essentially capitalize early and get big as quickly as possible. We got there, and it was never we didn't even really know about how we found it. Is I was online looking for organizations accepting applications, and I found this application for the Y Combinator, and I started filling it out. And while I was just looking at it technically to see if we could pitch them to use Submittable instead. But while I was filling it out, I actually thought the questions that they were asking were like, there's a lot of like entrepreneurial this and that, but they were actually questions that spoke to me. It was like, how will you make money? You know, who will pay you your first dollar? And so I just quickly filled it out just that night and applied. And they do have, I didn't really realize what I was doing, but they have approximately like a 3% acceptance rate. So when they accepted us, I didn't even know. When I got the letter, I had kind of forgotten that I had applied. And we're not like 20-year-olds. Both my partners and I, the other partners were over 40. So we moved to Mountain View for 3 months to participate in this thing. And one, we were out of money, so they gave us a little money, so that was pretty attractive. Two, I knew that, like, I started running into this thing where I realized, like, if I did the hardest thing, then whoever was going to come after me would have to do something that hard too. And telling your family when you're 45 that you're moving to Mountain View for 3 months was pretty difficult. And so I thought of that, like that was really what motivated us to do it. Like, this is something really, really hard, and whoever is going to come after us will have to do something that's hard. But it ended up being an amazing experience. It really sort of made us think about growth and acceleration, and the fact that you're not just in a race to get customers, but you're a race against like there's not only like, do we have to get to profitability and all that, but you have to get ahead of the next thing that's going to disrupt you. Like, there's something behind us that's better. I mean, you're probably running into this too, that there's something that's going to disrupt us soon. So we got to get big before that happens, or get to some sort of safety. And also just being around incredibly smart people. But at the end of the day, there's no mountains in Mountain View, which I would never live there in a million years. It was one of the recurring things I thought about these people, like, Stanford MBAs and like pedigree off the charts. But I just kept thinking, like, if they're so smart, why do they live here? And it just kind of was the subtext of every conversation I had with them. I just couldn't really get past that. And so anyway, we came back, and things worked out, and we're super. It's, building a high-tech company, there are hurdles, but I think they make you stronger, and I've loved doing it here.
That's great. So Eric's one of those few in the crowd who has built a profitable, significant company without taking any venture money or any outside capital. And Eric, I think really great to share your story for other entrepreneurs who aspire to do what you've done. How did you do that? That's just a hard thing to do anywhere, particularly here in Montana, as we've alluded to. And then beyond just your ability to kind of get to cash flow break even and just do it through customer revenue, what are some of the other things that you really feel were obstacles that either unique to your journey or the Montana journey that you could share maybe with people?
Okay. So how did I do it? Let's see. So I guess it started with just focusing on a product that you're passionate about and make sure you're following your passion, I guess, is a big part of being successful as an entrepreneur. So I had that fit. And then I was just blessed to find a product that was really good market fit. And so from there I did a bunch of search engine optimization, search engine marketing. So that's a bunch of marketing that I decided to do online that I didn't have to put a lot of money into, so I could show up in front of people and Google searches without actually having to pay for that. So just hunting maps in Montana, hunting maps Colorado, hunting maps Wyoming. Was able to use some marketing techniques that are kind of cutting edge to where I didn't have to invest a lot of money to start. So got the cash flows coming in. Thankfully, I had a product that people had to tell their buddies about, so there's a lot of viral growth through that. And from there, that's really some of the most key components to being able to bootstrap this company to where we are today.
If I just can, before we go to the challenges, so how did you get Cabela's and retailers to start carrying you, and those, as a small company dealing with these giant retailers and getting access to inventory and shelf space. And tell us about that.
Yeah, so right away, I had a strategy to just go to local sporting goods stores that had hunting departments and, basically try to sell them our product. And thankfully, some of those sporting goods stores had the capability to buy locally, so they could actually on the spot say, hey, I can sell that product, I'm going to buy it. So Sportsman's Warehouse was able to do that. Shields and Billings, Shields across Montana was able to do that. And then Cabela's, because we had the angle to say, hey, sell this map, you're more likely to sell your Garmin GPS unit if you have this product. It took a while to get into their corporate inventory, but we actually were able to put brochures at Cabela's before we actually were like a full product in their store. So they were actually sending people to our website to buy the product because they could sell a Garmin GPS unit with the product. So that was kind of an advantage we had.
Clever, yeah.
But Cabela's did take, we started in 2009, and it took till 2012 to get into Cabela's. There's a application process, and it just takes time, and takes time to get in their display sets, and so that just took time.
As you think about some other challenges that you've experienced that are worth sharing, either from an entrepreneurial perspective or from people correcting policies that have been challenging for you to manage too, or rules, is there anything else you want to share with us, just in terms of some of the things that
Challenges?
Yeah.
I think just in the beginning, looking back, I wish I had mentors in the beginning. I probably could avoid a lot of mistakes. So just awareness that all the programs were out there. I mean, there's all these great programs I learned later in starting the business, but just awareness in the beginning and having a mentor to say, wait, did you look at this? Did you look at this? That was a big factor for me. When we made the transition from just the more manufacturing-related product, for the Garmin GPS unit, to the software development that goes into creating an application for smartphones. Recruiting software engineers proved to be a challenge for us. I think there was a lot of mistakes we made in doing that, and strategies we could have done better to improve that, but it was a challenge, and eventually we solved it with just networking, through just networking and solving it that way. So that was a challenge for us. Culture is always a thing that I actually didn't think too much about culture like most entrepreneurs to start out with, but as far as culture goes, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is we looked into Montana labor laws, and we have employees that are right in the 40 range. They're professionals. They graduated from universities in Montana or Montana State University. They have a degree. Really, really talented team members, but the even above median salaries are less than $57,000 a year. So we're not able to get them on salary. They actually think of themselves as professionals, and they want to be on salary. They want to have the flexibility that they see their salary team members having. They want to be able to work 35 hours one week and 50 in the next week, but because of Montana labor law, we have to actually tell them they can't do that. We keep them on a strict 40-hour-a-week schedule, and that, as far as culture, that actually feels like the state is forcing this cultural element onto our company. So that's one thing that I really think is a big deal, actually.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay. Who can fix that for us? Thank you, Webb. So, Michael, you said you got Amazon and all these big customers, Nike, AT&T. So you call and you say, this is a so-and-so sales guy from Submittable, and want to charge you, big corporation, a bunch of money. Well, where are you guys based? We're in Missoula, Montana. As you've gone into the bigger customers, the higher dollar orders, what's it been like to be a Montana company? And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I think it's become less and less of an issue. I think in the beginning, I remember making phone calls or setting up an appointment, and people answer the phone when they see a 406 number. So I get CEOs, I was trying to cold call CEOs in the beginning, and they think it's they're their next door neighbor of their fishing lodge, and their water mains are broken or something, and so they answer the phone, and they're usually surprised to be getting pitched software. But in the beginning, we had a PO box in New York, which was our New York office, and we had that on the website, and then we started getting calls like, "This is so and so at Condé Nast, can we come over?" And that was a problem. And I definitely, when I would set up appointments, I would, there was always a time that if the demo or the call was going to be on the East Coast, I would say, I'm on Mountain Standard Time, where are you? And I would say Montana. And they knew I was the CEO, so I like more than once, I could tell that they thought I was at my second home for the weekend. And I didn't just say the company's located here. But definitely in the last 3 years, like people absolutely kind of like are into it. Our customer support people, they get calls from all over the world, and they'll be very aggressive with the information that we're located in Montana, and everybody's driven through, or they had a sister who had an amazing experience here, or somebody, and that usually it makes like a great tone. And customer support is one of the things, there's sort of ways you're supposed to build a SaaS company, and percentages of the employees that should be engineering and sales and whatever. And we very early on doubled down on customer support, because we could get, Missoula is a university town, highly educated, underemployed population, and we have found amazing support people. And unlike most software companies, we get on the phone as much as possible. And it's made a huge difference. Our NPS score is triple the industry standard.
What does that mean?
Net promoter score. So it's essentially how your customers view you.
I'm just playing my role here.
Yeah, thank you.
Moderating.
Sorry. And it's just over and over again, love their customer service, because most software companies don't have any. As software engineers, when we started the company, one of our main goals was to never talk to a customer again. We had this vision where people were just putting in their credit card, and we didn't, and then we found that it was a way of differentiating the product, and we found, our customer support, education-wise, just they're some of the smartest people in our building.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you've gone from 17 to 55 people in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hiring. What hires have been hard because you're here, and what can you share about that?
Yeah. I think similar to Eric, we've had a little bit of trouble with engineering, not full stack, but mostly design and front end. Even the top, the talented designers in Missoula, a lot of them cut their teeth sort of designing golf course brochures or things that are less software and more about the area, and it doesn't translate perfectly. So sort of branding and design, we've had a hard time finding local talent, but not engineering. When we would pitch venture capitalists in San Jose or wherever, they were constantly where are you going to get engineering talent? That hasn't been the hurdle. The hurdle has been branding, and then sales executives who have done it before. There's nobody in Missoula who. We try to steal Eric's salespeople, but even Eric's, his product doesn't. He's a software company, but it's consumer, and our software we sell to business. So it's a kind of different. It's a different skill set, and he's mobile. We really can't steal their employees, and we can't. Yeah. Well, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this part-time thing. Salary only engineers. But yeah.
So senior enterprise salespeople.
Senior enterprise salespeople is very hard.
Okay.
Who have experience.
Yeah. And as it relates to raising money, so congratulations again, $5.5 million from True Ventures. True Ventures, for people who don't know, is one of the industry's top early stage venture funds, and their big winner recently was Fitbit, which at one point had a $10 billion market cap, and WordPress, and a really significant company. So what was that like? You're able to talk, a Bay Area-only venture firm into doing a deal in Missoula, Montana. How'd you do that?
Well, I went down there, and you essentially knock on doors, and we used sort of connections to get in the door for a lot of them. But once you're in, you have a deck, and you show them the numbers, and hopefully there's one chart that goes off up and to the right, and there's even that has changed. Like when I first pitched people after Y Combinator in 2012, while I was talking to them, they would pull up their laptops and Google Missoula, or they'd bring out Expedia, and they would want to see how many flights, because if they're going to do a board meeting and they have if it's 2 connections, they're immediately committing to 3 days. If you do a board meeting every 2 months, 3 days out of 60 they're spending on this small company in Missoula, Montana. So that I know that was an issue for some places, and they all didn't think we could get engineers. Like their biggest concern is you can't scale the company because you won't be able to get engineers. We later sort of proved that we could. Speaking, venture capitalists, they're sort of like any of us. They are actually, the Yellowstone Club has sort of also cracked the ice a little bit because everyone's been to Montana now. And so maybe they think that's what the rest of it is like. But a lot of them, while you're talking, they'd all been to Big Sky. And so you pretended like we all live. And then...
Do you have a P.O. box at the Yellowstone Club?
That's right, a P.O. box in the Yellowstone Club. But... yeah, it's absolutely gotten easier. It also gets easier when you're making money, like they're much.
There seems to be a sense that if you hit a minimum level of maturity, where the metrics speak for themselves, geography is not as important.
That's right.
Would you say that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for that. So, Zeb, one of the things that you've done really well is commercialize university intellectual property. And if you think about the MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellons, of the world. A lot of the companies that we use every day originally came out of a university lab. What could you share about why, again, your industry has been successful at spawning companies when maybe other disciplines, without naming names, or other campuses, or have had a hard time with that? And is there any secret sauce there that you guys have cracked?
I don't know if there's any secret sauce. I think, one of the things, optics is comes from 2 disciplines on campus, the electrical engineering and physics. And kind of what you see a lot is we have a graduate program, and you graduate a person with a PhD in physics or electrical engineering, and then they go, now what? And they love Bozeman, want to stay there, but in some sense a PhD is not an employable degree. You find a lot.
That's why I didn't get one.
Yeah. You find I've had students who graduate with masters get jobs much easier than students who graduate with a PhD. In a lot of the industries, especially defense industries and such, in electrical engineering physics, who'd be employing them, they don't like PhDs because they see them as independent, don't take direction well, don't do what they want them to do. And so people get a PhD and they're like, well, what am I going to do? But I don't want to stay in Bozeman. So they go, I start a company. And so that's been actually one of the things that's kind of happened in Bozeman, is that we've graduated a lot of PhDs, they're hanging around, need something to do, and so they start a company. And that's, I would say, Outgrowth, S2 Corporation, Bridger Photonics, ADVR is another example of that in Bozeman. And so that's one thing that's kind of, I think that's one reason why the optics industry kind of hit in Bozeman. But I think another thing that's then really a big help was that, there were a few companies that started early on and built a reputation, in particular Big Sky Laser, part of a international company called Quantel, and ILX Lightwave, where they kind of hit on good technologies, built up a reputation, and so then when you're at an optics conference anywhere in the world and you mention, hey, I'm from Bozeman, it's not like, oh, where the hell is that? it's Bozeman, Montana. Okay, I know that because Big Sky Laser's been a established industry player for a long time. Science Materials Corp with FLIR, and so that's kind of been, I don't know how that, growth or that, kind of establishment, it kind of takes time to establish that cluster, and I think, so that's something that, I think if we want to do that elsewhere in Montana, is you have to look for that industry that you're particularly good at in your city and, kind of focus on that and try to build that reputation, and that does two things: attracts people, more talent, and it attracts more customers, because then it's like, they don't have to, you're less of a risk if they're going to work with you.
Yeah. So one more for you. So if you look at Eric, he sells through the App Store, iTunes and Google Play. Michael sells through a Salesforce. A lot of times photonics industry is the ultimate buyers, the government. It's military contracts and defense. If we think about, the growth in budgeting of the new defense budget, certainly where a lot of research money is still available is in the DoD and DARPA. What's your advice to entrepreneurs or companies that are thinking about tying their growth to being able to penetrate government spending, and anything you can share with that?
Well, so our lab, most of all our funding comes from federal grants and contracts, both directly to our lab and with collaboration with companies that we work with in Bozeman. And I would say, that's a path to, basically, a certain size company and stagnation. As there's a lot of companies in Bozeman that got their start with small business innovative research program grants, and some of those were able to transition that into actual product lines and products, and then you're able to grow. And other companies basically just stuck with that program, and it's a well-known phenomenon throughout the United States, not just Montana and the optics industry. Is yes, there's these SBIR companies, and that's basically all they do, and they get trapped on that. It's a way to have, it's kind of like a lifestyle company where you have a company, you're just working basically off research and development contracts, but you're really never able to grow. And so I think we have to do a better job of learning how to transition those companies from that path away from that to a commercial product and product lines.
That's well said. In fact, Will Swearingen at MSU has a slide he puts up that says if you take more than 5 SBIR grants or STTR grants, the odds of you shipping a product approach 0. So these companies get started on that, but you're absolutely right. That transition is very difficult to manage. Well, I'm just going to open it up to questions for our panelists. Dan over here has a mic, and if anyone would like to ask some questions, please do. So Liz Markey has a question. Is it about Wagyu beef?
So being originally from Alabama, I've always looked at average wages. And I have to say my state has moved way up, and Montana still is in the bottom quartile, if not in the bottom centile. So Michael, talk a little bit about, all of you, about your wage levels and your employee earnings.
Yeah, so one of the, we have some sort of like KPIs that I sort of watch, or that the things that I care about, and one is how many houses our employees bought. So since starting the company, we've had 5 employees buy a house, like first-time homeowners. How many babies are born? We've had 6, and we got 1 in the oven. And then I just think, like, in the beginning, like, what do you care about? I mean, it's like we care about the product, we care about our clients, but like my staff is sort of everything, and if they go away, and so the metrics around them are like, the most gratifying thing for me now at this point is walking down the street and seeing sort of a young family like out on a Sunday having a great existence, and knowing that we sort of help do that. It's easily the most gratifying thing. And so our wage metrics, I think we measured in September. The median wage for the company is 2.7. 2.7 times the median wage in Missoula. I think it's 72,000 for the average employee. And yeah, and we're very sort of progressive. 3 months off for, I don't know if Will knows all this stuff, and he's a board member, so I don't know. But we have very progressive.
I get 3 months off, great.
Maternity leave. I want people buying houses and having babies because one, they're sort of stuck with me if they do that. But two, it just we find they come back as like the best employees, if they have something really to work for, and so yeah, I guess you're at 2.7
times the median. What about you, Eric? Can you share any stats like that?
Yeah, we have about the same median wage there, right in the 70s. That consists a lot of, you've got lower tier, like I talked about, you got customer service folks and certain people that are in that lower range of 35 to 60, and then you do have 6-figure salaries on the upper end for software engineers and various folks like that. So that's where you kind of get to that median salary, and it's so that's what
we did something. The University of Montana Foundation invested in our funds, and we did some work for them, and we looked at our portfolio across them all. And this is from July of this year, or last year, I should say. But there were like 88 new jobs at 106,000 was the average. So just in the last 3 years, yeah.
I'm Michael Charles Robinson with USDA. I do rural development. You said that if you do the hardest thing, whoever comes after you will have to do something harder. Could you expand on that a bit, and who are you looking over your shoulder?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have competition, but in the beginning, so similar to Eric, we kind of hit it at the right time, and that's really something you can't plan for. Like we were sort of early in SaaS. We just, like, there wasn't a lot of competition, and we saw other startups like ours, and some of them were extremely well funded. They were closer to sort of New York or San Francisco. Some of them had pedigree, like they just had New York publishing people behind them. And it was terrifying, right? Like you'd spend a year building this stuff, and now somebody showed up with Google money or something. And we found that one, if they have a lot of money early, they have to go spend it, and it's the easiest thing in the world is to spend somebody else's money stupidly. And so a lot of times companies died because they were too funded up front. So being broke for the first 2 years is actually really valuable. If you don't know what you're doing, you want to do that on your own dime. Learning how to, I didn't know anything. I was an English major. I didn't know how to sell, so I had to sell everything, and I did everything wrong in the beginning. So learning how to do enterprise sales, learning how to support 2 million people, like infrastructure, like creating software is one thing, but actually creating an infrastructure that supports volume. Like if you're successful, there's tons of stories like Friendster, which was pre-Facebook, should be Facebook, but it died because they didn't concentrate on their infrastructure, and they had performance problems early. I don't know, it seems like every single, we're 10 years in and we're successful, but at every single stage there's something that I'm doing incorrectly, and I don't realize it until 2 months later. But raising money was hard. Finding your first customer is a different sale than your 10th customer, and your 100th customer is a different sale than your 10th. And they're all hard. It doesn't get easier.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. Not only did he do all that, but he also beat cancer this year. So, Michael, doing that while you're doing chemo treatments, very impressive.
That was really hard. Yeah, I don't want my competition to get cancer.
They don't have to do that yet.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, Amy.
Thanks, Will, and thank you all for being on our panel. As a former board member of the Chamber, I'm just super impressed with all of the work that you've done to elevate the jobs across Montana, and thanks to Will for getting more money into venture cap in Montana. I guess my question goes to some of the follow-up that Liz Markey and I have had conversations about over the last few years. if there's something that I've heard all of you talk about, whether it's looking for, Eric, you talked about some of the software engineers or engineers that you found or not found, and I think that Michael's talked a little bit about some of the challenges. Is there anything that you would put on your top 10 wish list that we could either work on the business community standpoint, helping you find those mentors right away, which is not a legal change, or changing the law in Montana in some way to support and encourage entrepreneurship across Montana? I'm curious about that, and thank you.
Yeah, I think when I think about that question, I think one of our big issues is just like awareness. Montana's awesome. Montana's inspiring. Like, we got to market this thing, and that's exactly what, like, Greg Gianforte finally had success by just going down to San Francisco and putting up billboards that said, "Come back to Montana. You know you love it. You got skiing. You got everything." So I think anything you guys can do to help raise awareness is going to be the foundation to I think entrepreneurial growth and tech growth in Montana. In some ways, that's one thing.
Zeb, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say, like early mentorship, very early mentorship. We have a lot of, like I said, the PhDs with not knowing what to do. They have a technology they think is something, right? But they have no idea who's going to use it or no market. They don't even know if they have a business. And so, I had one employee of mine had an idea for technology, and he was wanted to start a company, and he went into the Blackstone Launchpad, and he was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a company. What is the this is what I'm doing." And they asked him, "Well, what's your business plan?" And he's like, he's a PhD physicist. What's a business plan, right? And so I think at the technology areas, software may be different, but definitely in more of a hardware-based technology. At early mentorship, I think, is very important to say, "Hey, no, you don't have anything here," or go back to the drawing board and look about, try to find what your customer would be, because that's going to be your successful company, not the company that just has a technology. They have to have a customer also.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that one. And again, it's most likely an awareness thing. Like, how do we get that person to know that a mentor is available? So again, pointing back to awareness on that was what I struggled with.
And just to go back to Michael's experience at Y Combinator, let's say there are 30 companies a year going through that program, 12-week program, and it's been going on since 2005. So we're 12 years into it. So do the math. There's hundreds of companies that have come out of it, and that there's a really tight network of information flow across those groups. So the other thing maybe thinking about doing would be to create a group of companies that aren't the large companies in the state, but create a forum for them to get to know each other and share information. At least knowing there's someone else there like me that is going through similar problems, that would be interesting. Hey, Dax.
Well, thanks for the panel for being here. And you guys are somewhat in, Bozeman and Missoula is represented, and you do have the flagship universities there. What would you say to some of the other communities that want to have a piece of this, be part of their story? What should they be doing across Montana to see some of the success? Do you have any suggestions there?
Eric, you're from Miles City. You want to take that?
Okay.
Why not do it in Miles City?
What should other cities look to when they look at Missoula and Bozeman?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was thinking about is just when we're recruiting talent, we take people to the downtown area and like, oh, here's all these great restaurants, here's all these great things to look at the downtown. So I think Missoula and Bozeman have done a good job to foster that downtown and cultural feel, like focus on the culture of Montana in ways. So I would say to those cities, focus on your culture and focus on the culture of Montana and make that shine.
I think there's also an opportunity to build things that are every town and every city in Montana is unique, and I think Eric built something that he personally was experiencing, or he fixed a problem that he was personally experiencing. I went after a problem that I was personally experiencing, and I think if I lived in Helena, I would probably be circling around something in remote governments or governments that aren't state capital governments that of a certain size. I'm sure there's problems there.
No, There's no
Yeah,
problem.
no problems. I mean, I meet, for better or for worse, people come to me for advice now, and kids starting companies, and I think a lot of them have these ideas about things that they don't personally have any experience with, or if they think of Montana as a Montanan as their customer, then they're immediately thinking it's too small, and I think that that's naive. When you really launch your product, it should be as focused on a niche as possible. Everyone hears market size as if it's not $1 billion market, it's stupid to even try. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems when you first start, especially in a place that is undercapitalized like Montana. You have to get paying customers as soon as humanly possible. And so if you can somehow figure out something that your neighbor would value, and I think each city in Montana is unique, and I think we all can recognize the sort of type from each of our towns. And so I would focus on something that is specific about Kalispell or Helena. I think there's probably opportunity there.
Yeah, I would give the same advice. Find out what you're actually already doing. I mean, that's kind of what happened in Bozeman with the optics, is that there was already, just happened to be a couple of companies in the optics and photonics industry that had started and were doing well, and recognizing that and then supporting that. So recognizing in your city what's going on, what's going well, and trying to promote that. Don't try to repeat what Bozeman's doing. Don't try to repeat what Missoula's doing. Find out what you're doing well, and try to promote that and push that ahead.
I'll just say one thing, and then before we go to Liz, Amy, one of the things that on the vision plan is workforce development, and one of the things that Zeb's cluster has done really well is recognizing there was a deficit of not 4-year degrees, but 2-year programs that were people learning technical jobs, how to run machines and work in the testing equipment area. So Galton College has started this 2-year program now for photonics technicians. They can come out, they're getting jobs right away. Again, it's not the 4-year degree or the graduate degree, but in some sense it's a vocational training program, not necessarily a formal apprentice program, but it's still a degree that was created by the industry in Bozeman to create a need for talent. And Trent, who used to work at Blackmore, came out of industry, going back to Galton College to run that program. I think if we could have similar programs like that in software development or others that are either 1 or 2-year certificates that then go right into a ready job market, it's a good example that Zeb's pulled together there. So thanks for that.
And I just would be remiss if I didn't say I'm so excited to be working with the State Chamber Foundation on one of the 4 pillars, which is entrepreneurship and innovation. And we have just finished right before Christmas a new site called MakeMontanaHome.org. That is a recruitment site primarily focused on expat Montanans who have moved away and have no idea that we have 500 tech jobs open in our state, really have no idea of the kind of culture that is building not only in Missoula and Bozeman. We've also launched a new Facebook page at the end of the year called Montana Telecommuters. It is incredible. We've already had we haven't done any PR. This is kind of the first mention of this. We've already had 25 people sign up and say, I'm working for the National Institute of Health and I live in Choteau. It's just absolutely incredible. I'm working for IBM. I'm living in Two Dot. So that's a huge opportunity, and I think the more that we start looking as Montana as a base to reach the world, as opposed to our traditional retail businesses, which are only going to get so big, we've got a lot of opportunity there. So we're really focusing on telecommuters, bringing Montana home. So we're going to be mostly doing very inexpensive digital marketing. For example, the high school reunion Facebook pages in Montana this spring that are in our demographic, which are pretty much a 30 to 55-year-old, highly skilled person who might want to move back. We'll be doing marketing toward them, and the digital allows us to do that. And then we're also expanding and trying to work on coding education, how Code Montana already is, if you ever look at a map, we have kids learning to code everywhere in our state, because that's sort of geographically agnostic, and those are skills that can be applied. So I've been doing it now for development for 30 years. I'm done with politics. I love chambers of commerce because at the end of the day, they're always about business, and you're always going to be supporting business, and we just need to realize that our opportunities are changing in Montana, And I love these guys. I love the culture they're building. And I know how unbelievably they've worked. And I'm so grateful that God sent Will to Montana so I can retire.
There's a story about that. I went up to see John and Liz on the ranch in Polson. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a venture fund in Montana, but I don't want to do it without your support and blessing. And also to know that you think it's worthy thing to do. And from day one, Liz has been a great mentor to me. So thank you, Liz. Well, I'll wrap that up on that note. I just want to say that I think in all three of the gentlemen on the platform here are absolutely at the heart of how's Montana grow. I think Onyx, as it goes out of hunting into recreation and fishing, it really is Google Maps for the rest of when you get off a road, and helping people solve that problem of waking up anywhere in the country going, what am I going to do today? How am I going to get there? And how am I going to recreate? I think the vision that Eric's brought and what he's been able to do, again, without any capital to date, is absolutely remarkable. So thank you, Eric, for being up here today with us. Yeah, Michael, proving you can build a software as a service company in Missoula, Montana, getting to 55 employees, attracting California venture capital, and 10,000 customers. It's again a remarkable. If you go to the Florence building, they're kind of slowly taking it over. I know David Bell was here earlier, but we're gonna have to take their office, I think, soon. Sorry, David. So Michael, thank you for that. Yeah. And then really, in the sleeper cluster, in some sense, is the biggest cluster, is the photonics industry. Doesn't get as much press as software, but the applications that we're starting to see now with self-driving cars, new forms of electronic warfare that are going to be at the heart of our defense systems. I'm really proud of the Montana State and Bozeman and Zeb's lab is spawning these businesses that are bringing the best of our intellectual property into the commercial sector and solving really large-scale problems. So thank you, Zeb, for being here as well. Well, I think that concludes our panel, and I hope to see everyone later tonight at the party. So thank you.